Hey, Jason.
Yes, Gary.
I had a good question this week from somebody.
Someone in the studio audience?
Yeah, somebody in the studio audience. Does Proverbs have chapters?
Yes.
So why does Proverbs have chapters and Psalms does not?
Because Proverbs is a collection of a single collection. The book of Proverbs is a single collection of a multitude of proverbs that are divided up into chapters. But the book of Psalms is a collection of individual psalms that are numbered independently of one another.
I'll buy that.
Did that sound?
That sounded very, very.
I made that up right here on the
that
spot.
was a good job of making that up. But each chapter of Proverbs has a bunch of proverbs.
Yes.
So each chapter is not a proverb; it's a whole bunch of them.
Right.
But Psalms, somebody pointed out Sunday, is a songbook.
Somebody did say that.
They said something about being a songbook, and so we don't pick up our songbook and say turn to chapter 23.
Well,
It's song number whatever.
while we're talking about pet peeves, can I address one about the songbook?
Depends on who's the.
When we do that, when we say turn to number, it's the song number, it's not the page number.
Oh yeah.
It's not page number
No.
278.
No,
it's
some
the
pages
song number
some pages
278.
have more than one.
Yeah, right.
And
So
some songs take up more than one page.
correct. So we're numbered the
We've got-
songs,
we
just
got
like the psalm.
So many things.
We
to
should
work
just
on.
do an hour one night of pet peeves.
Pet peeves. That would be really popular.
I don't
That
think
would-
we should do that.
I don't think it's a good idea.
No, yeah, and you guys don't get to participate in that one. We're just telling you.
Yeah.
We're just going to lay it out for you.
You betcha.
Um,
And there will be no audience when we get
That's
through.
right.
Our listening audience will dwindle.
That's another one of my pet peeves. Audiences that walk out when I'm telling them what they ought to do. Okay.
How are they going to learn?
Exactly. Hey, Gary,
Hey, Jason.
what book are we reading this week?
We are-
for look at the book.
Reading in First Kings.
Yes, we are. And what book are we reading next week?
We're going to read Proverbs.
Why
next
are we
week
jumping around like that?
Because we read 2 Samuel and then Psalms because 2 Samuel was pretty much focused on David.
Correct.
And David wrote many of the Psalms, and so it made sense chronologically to have 2 Samuel and then David's writings of Psalms. And then First Kings deals a lot at the beginning with Solomon.
Mm-hmm.
And Solomon wrote Proverbs.
Many of them, yes.
Yeah, many of them, and not all of them. And Ecclesiastes and Song of Solomon.
Mm-hmm.
And so in chronological order, after we do First Kings, then we're going to do some of Solomon's books.
So we'll do Proverbs, and then the next week won't even be 2 Kings yet. It'll be
I think it's Ecclesiastes,
Ecclesiastes.
and then we go to 2 Kings.
right.
So I
Okay.
hope they have a scorecard to keep track of all that
I
stuff.
hope they're paying attention.
because it's
We'll try to help them out all we can.
we're a big help.
Well, I'm big and you're a help. Okay.
So what book are we talking about tonight?
Revelations.
Revelations. No
Yes,
S.
sorry. Yeah.
Just
Revelation.
one good old revelation. Now, you remember last week, remember the overall outline is we start out with a vision, and then there'll be 7 somethings or 4 somethings, and then we go into a new section. And last week we started section 2 with a vision, and where was that vision?
Where was the location of the vision? In
Yeah.
the throne room of heaven.
That's correct. You must have been paying attention.
A little bit.
And who is the central figure in that? Who does it focus on? That scene in the throne room of heaven, who is the central figure that it's all about?
God.
God. We're still in that same vision in chapter 5.
Yes, we are.
But the central figure changes. And now the figure switches from God to somebody else.
Mhm.
But we're still in that same part of this second section, of the vision section. And then in chapter 6, then we'll start seeing some 7s things coming up,
Okay.
I think. The first 5 verses of chapter 5 deal with a sealed book or a sealed scroll. Remember, Revelation is a book about books. It's about seals. It's about a lot of things that are repeated over and over throughout the book. And there are a number of books in that book, or scrolls in that book. Is that a devious smile on your face?
Not at all.
Okay. And so the first 5 verses have to do with the sealed. They didn't have books. I mean, they had scrolls. Well, they did have books.
They were just coming into being.
They were just coming into popularity. And it says, forgot to change that one slide. It's verses 1 to 3. I changed my divisions a little bit, but I didn't change that first slide.
Oh, it's okay.
And I saw on the right hand of him who sat on the throne a book written inside and on the back, sealed up with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the book and to break its seals?" And no one in heaven or on the earth or under the earth was able to open the book or to look into it. And so there is a book that is written inside and out. And it's probably safe to say that this book represents God's plan, God's will, everything that God has planned. And the fact that it's written inside and out is the whole thing.
Right.
It's front and back. And so it's all of His will, but it's sealed with 7 seals. Seals serve different purposes. They are they're proof of ownership. They are proof of authenticity. They serve many purposes. But as long as the book is sealed and not opened, then it can't be carried out. It's in there, but it doesn't take place. And so the question is, who is worthy to open that? And the answer is no one. No one on earth is worthy to do that. And I would suggest that may be the most important question in all of history. Who is worthy to set God's plan in motion? If God's plan cannot be carried out and put in motion, then what matters? Without God's direction and God's plan, it's all pointless. And so that's a critical question. Who is worthy? And the answer is no one. And in the next few verses, 4 through 8, we are introduced to a lion and a lamb. And John begins to weep greatly because no one was found worthy to open the book or to look into it. And one of the elders said to me, "Stop weeping. Behold, the lion that is from the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has overcome so as to open the book and its 7 seals." One of the elders says, "Don't cry. The lion from the tribe of Judah is worthy to do it." And so John turns and he sees a lion.
No.
No? "And I saw between the throne with the 4 living creatures and the elders a lamb standing as if slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. And he came and took it out of the right hand of him who sat on the throne. And when he had taken the book, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, having each one a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints." John weeps greatly. Why does John weep? Why is he so upset that the books can't be opened, that the seals can't be broken? Because of what we said. There's pointless. Everything's pointless. Without God's plan being carried out, it's all pointless.
There's something about that book that John knows when he sees it how important it is. He doesn't know what's in it. He doesn't know what it contains, but he knows it's of the greatest importance.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I don't know if it's just because of the setting or the presentation or the fact that it is where it is and the way that it's being handled. He does know that it's in something important. And he probably doesn't know exactly what's involved because it's sealed up. But you're right. He knows that it's something important, and so he's distraught because it can't be opened. But the Lion of Judah has overcome. He has overcome everything. I mean, we know that he's overcome sin. He's overcome death. He has overcome everything there is to overcome.
Can we tie that idea of having overcome back to the question of who is worthy? Because worthy, there's something about having overcome that's made him worthy.
I think the two are probably exactly the same, because the question is who is worthy, and they say he can open it because he has overcome. So I would say that they're the same thing. That it is his overcoming that makes him worthy.
Right.
So you're right. I think that is the key. he looks between the throne and the four creatures, those four living creatures, the cherubim and the elders. And in the midst of all that, he sees a lamb as if slain. And so again, he's told that it's a lion, but it's a lamb. And so we have a lion that's a lamb and a lamb who's the shepherd. You follow that? But that's true, isn't it? We have a lion who's a lamb, and that lamb is the shepherd, the great shepherd. And there he appears as if slain, which gets back to what you were saying about being worthy, because he has overcome. It is his death and his overcoming of that death that makes him worthy. Mm-hmm. And so he sees this lamb as if slain. And this lamb has 7 horns and 7 eyes. It says the 7 eyes are the 7 spirits of God. You remember that a horn represents strength. Mm-hmm. And 7 horns would be complete strength. And so this lamb, and you wouldn't expect a lamb to have 7 horns, maybe a ram to have a couple, but he has all strength and 7 eyes, the 7 spirits of God. And so we have a complete power, all-seeing, all-powerful. We sometimes talk about God being omnipotent. He's all-powerful, he's omniscient, he's all knowing, he's omnipresent. And so that's sort of what we see here in the Lamb. And the Lamb walks up and he takes the book. Now we see sometimes when someone is handed a book, the book is given to them, but this one walks up and takes the book because he's worthy. He's worthy to take it and open those seals. And as soon as he takes that, the living creatures and the elders fall down before the Lamb. He hadn't done anything yet. He hadn't opened any seals. Mm-hmm. So why did they do that?
Have they ever bowed down in worship before?
Yeah, and we see a lot of parallels between how Jesus is treated and how God is treated.
So that tells us something about who they view Jesus as being, who they view the Lamb as being, because they only bow down and worship God.
That's exactly right. Of all the creatures in the universe, they know better than to bow down and worship anyone other than God, the Creator. And there are a number of things throughout the book of Revelation that make that parallel. Jesus is referred to as the beginning and the end. God is the Alpha and the Omega. In this chapter, we'll see some other things, other connections between Jesus and God. And so, yeah, the fact that they bow down is significant. It's also significant when they do it. You'd think that after he opened the seals, they would bow down because he's done a great job. Whenever God does something or whenever Jesus does something, it is done when they say it's going to be done. Mm-hmm. Just the fact that Jesus takes that book, it is a done deal. It's open. Everything is carried out. Just him having the book makes it a done deal.
Because he is worthy.
He is worthy, and because of his worthiness, he is able to open those seals. There's no doubt about it. And so they don't wait till he opens the 7 seals to bow down. He takes it, and they fall down before the Lamb. What's that? Yeah, he took it from the hands of out of God's hands. And that again shows you that relationship that he is able to reach and take something that God is holding in his hand. I wouldn't do that.
Well, and the 24 elders and the 4 living creatures that constantly surround the throne in worship never approach the throne.
No,
they never go and approach God like that. All they do is bow and worship before him. But here's one who can walk past them and approach the throne.
Right, they all keep their place, mm-hmm. But his place is wherever he happens to want to be. Now, the creatures and the elders have a harp, golden bowls of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And here we want to point out the symbolic, figurative nature of the things that we are hearing, because the bowls are not bowls, and the incense is not incense. How do we know that the incense isn't incense? It says the bowl of incense is the prayers of the saints. So is it a bowl with incense, or is it the prayers of the saints? Well, it's the prayers of the saints. It's just represented with the bowls of incense. And so the bowls are not bowls, and the harps are not harps. There are no physical objects in heaven. It's not a physical place. And so it's just representative of what's going on. And as we pointed out several times already, that we need to look at the overall picture, what's being shown here. And so they're given, they have harps, bowls full of incense, but the incense is the prayers of the saints, and there's no reason to think that the harp is a literal harp. Partially because of what we see in the next two verses. And in the next two verses, we find out why the Lamb is worthy. The Lamb is worthy. You notice that it does not say they played a new tune. They sang a new song. They didn't use the harp to play a new tune. They sang a new song, saying, "Worthy art thou to take the book and to break its seals. For thou wast slain, and didst purchase for God with thy blood men from every tribe and tongue and people and nation. And thou hast made them to be a kingdom and priests to our God, and they will reign upon the earth." They sing a new song. And later in the book of Revelation, it'll talk about a song that no one knows except the ones that receive it. It doesn't mean that nobody else is allowed to. It's just that you cannot understand what someone else has done to get to where they are. You know, something's happening in someone's life, and we say, we understand, and we probably don't. We may have been through similar experiences, but the people who have really gone through what it takes to get there are the ones who can experience it. We also read in Revelation about the song of Moses and the Lamb. And so the book of Revelation is also a book about songs. And so it's a new song because this is a new song of praise, because now the Lamb is opening the seals. And it's all wonderful and glorious and new. And he did it because he is worthy, because he was slain, and then he purchased with his blood. Is it in toward the latter part of Acts, in about chapter 20 or so, where Paul is talking to the elders from Ephesus, and he talks about God purchasing the church with his own blood. Mm-hmm. And so the Lamb has purchased our salvation. He has purchased the church, his bride. He has purchased eternal salvation for all of those who obey him. And so he has purchased with his blood everybody who is of Jewish descent. It does not say everybody of Jewish descent. What's that? Yeah, I don't know who else would be included, because it includes every tongue, doesn't matter what language you speak, or every tribe, every tongue, every people, and every nation who's left. That's pretty much is everybody, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And that's what God has said all along. He promised to Abraham that through his descendant all nations would be blessed, and that passed on to Isaac and Jacob and on down the line. It's been God's intention all along for everybody to be able to benefit from the blood of Jesus, if they just will. And so he's worthy because he died, and with that death he purchased with his blood everybody. And he made them to be a kingdom and priests, and they will reign upon the earth. Now notice the tense here, and also back in chapter 1, that he has made them to be a kingdom. That's not a future event. It does not say that sometime 2,000, 3,000 years from now they will become a kingdom here on earth after a number of things have happened. He has already made us to be a kingdom and priests. And Peter tells us that we are priests. That's what we are. Mm-hmm. And we reign here upon the earth. I mean, we can't make laws and things like that, but we reign with Jesus. Jesus is the one that has the key to salvation, and he has entrusted that key to us, and we have the privilege and the opportunity of sharing that key with other people. There's no power on earth that's greater than that power. Nobody in history has had power greater than the power to share salvation with people. Because if we share that power with them, then they can be saved. And if we do not share it with them, then we have kept them from enjoying that that benefit. I don't know of any power greater than that. And if we are serving the one who is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and if we are serving him as his priests and so forth, then we, in a sense, are reigning with him even here on earth. Greg?
I think some translations don't quite get that. You know, I mean, I like the NIV, but my NIV says they will reign. And am I right? The reason that is the present active.
Well, it's the made to be kingdoms and priests. It's a past tense. The New American Standard said will reign too. But I think it's just that for the next however many years there are, they will be reigning. But the fact that he has made them to be a kingdom makes it not a future event. It doesn't say he will make them to be a kingdom, you know, a millennial kingdom after the rapture in 1,000 years and that kind of thing. This passage and others don't support that idea. In fact, they contradict it because of when it was that he made us to be a kingdom. Back in chapter 1 and verse 6, and this is not unlike what we read again in chapter 5, but in Revelation chapter 1 from verse 4, it says, John to the 7 churches that are in Asia, grace to you and peace from him who is and who was and who is to come, and from the 7 spirits who are before the throne, and from Jesus Christ, the faithful witness, the firstborn of the dead, and the ruler of the kings of the earth, to him who loves us and released us from our sins by his blood. He has made us to be a kingdom, priest to his God and Father. To him be the glory and the dominion forever and ever. Amen. And that sure sounds similar to what we've been reading in chapter 5. All of this about that the 7 spirits, and that he was a faithful witness. He's the firstborn of the dead. He's the ruler of the kings of the earth. He released us from our sins by his blood and has made us to be a kingdom and priests. And so that's basically what we're seeing again in chapter 5, that we're not looking forward to a rapture and then a millennium. He has already made us.
I don't know how important this is, but it's just interesting to me how vision starts in chapter 4, and the host who welcomes John is Jesus. And he goes through chapter 4, and Jesus is not really the center. And all of a sudden in chapter 5, the role of Jesus changes completely.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting.
It is interesting, and it is interesting to note the focus, that the scene stays the same, the setting is the same, but the central figure changes. And there again, that shows the status of Jesus with God, because in one chapter the throne is focused on God, and the next chapter is focused on Jesus, and that tells us something about their relationship, that they could switch that way. Did you have something?
Oh, I've got lots of somethings.
Do you have something on this chapter?
No, well, I had 2 independent thoughts. In Exodus chapter 19, when God presents the idea of entering into a covenant with his people, Exodus at the foot of Mount Sinai. Exodus 19, verse 5 and 6. Now that if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples, for the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. This is the relationship God has wanted with his people for all time. And all along the way, God has introduced measures by which his people could enter into that relationship and be that kingdom that he wants them to be. And it's only the Lamb that was able to overcome the obstacles and finally usher in the era of a kingdom that is what God intended it to be. And so the Lamb has done what Moses couldn't do, what Aaron couldn't do, what Abraham couldn't do before him, what Adam and Eve and Seth and all of Noah couldn't do. I mean, everyone who has tried to enter into that covenant relationship with God has always fallen short. But now the Lamb has done something, and that's what makes him worthy in this setting. So, he has delivered that.
And it is his role as a lamb that allows him to be sacrificed.
And the tie in there to the Abraham entered into covenant through the sacrifice of the covenantal sacrifice of the animals that were chopped in two, and God walked between the halves. And here we have at Mount Sinai, after the introduction of that covenant, there's sacrifices that institute that covenant. There's the atonement sacrifice that they had every year. That is the continuation of that idea of the lamb being sacrificed. And then finally, there was one lamb that came that was the perfect sacrifice.
And I think it is important to remember what you were saying about this has been God's will all along. He wants to be close to us.
Mm-hmm.
He wants us to just serve Him. That's all He's ever desired. And look at the lengths that He's gone to make that possible. That He was willing to send Jesus to die, to pay that price so that was possible. And so that's something we should never lose sight of, that this is what God has wanted us to do. Even the Israelites tell them He made them to be a kingdom and priests, when eventually they just had one tribe of priests and they weren't doing a very good job of it.
The other idea that your point that the kingdom is now. The kingdom is not something that we're waiting on because the kingdom has been already bought and purchased. Colossians 1:13 says, "For He delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of His beloved Son." We are in the kingdom now because of the purchase of Jesus Christ.
Exactly. And in fact, and that's the clearest way to see that. But if you'll notice in the Gospels, the kingdom is coming.
Mm-hmm.
The kingdom is coming, the kingdom is coming. Once you get past Acts chapter 2, it's always in the present tense. The kingdom has come.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a notable change in tenses. All the way up to that point, it is coming, but it's not here yet. After that point, it is here. And so there is no doubt about it that Colossians is right, oddly enough, that he has already done that, that it's a done deal. It's already happened. It happened when Jesus purchased, when he became worthy by shedding his blood. The chapter ends with a heavenly chorus. John says, "I looked and I heard the voice of many angels around the throne and the living creatures and the elders. And the number of them was myriads of myriads and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, 'Worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing.' And every created thing which is in heaven and on the earth and under the earth and on the sea, and all things in them, I heard saying, 'To Him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor and glory and dominion forever and ever.' And the four living creatures kept saying, 'Amen,' and the elders fell down and worshipped." He hears the voice of many angels, thousands and myriads of angels, the living creatures, the elders who join together in singing this song of praise. And again, they say, "Worthy is the Lamb." He is worthy. And they ascribe 7 things to Him. That's interesting. Go figure, 7 things. Power, riches, wisdom, might, honor, glory, and blessing. A little bit later in the book, we're going to find 7 things attributed to God. It's the same list except for one thing. There's only one thing that's changed. But it's primarily the same list that's applied to God. Mm-hmm. So are they talking about Jesus or are they talking about God?
Mm-hmm.
Now, who participates in this? We have the angels and the living creatures and the elders and all these myriads and thousands of thousands. But who eventually participates in it? Every living thing in heaven, on earth, under the earth, and on the sea, everywhere. So what does that leave out?
Nothing.
That pretty well covers it, doesn't it? Everything that there is above the earth, and on the water, and even under the earth, everything acknowledges this.
Amazing.
And every knee will bow.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, but even now, in this image in heaven, everything participates in this. To Him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. These two, to God and to the Lamb, they're going to attribute blessing, honor, glory, and dominion forever. 4 things. Go figure. To the two of them, God and Jesus, they offer blessing, honor, glory, and dominion for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
No, not for a little while. Forever and ever and ever. And everybody said, Amen. What does that mean?
Point of interest. But you know, when I was in 8th grade,
No?
in the county spelling bee in Douglas County, Kansas,
Uh-huh.
I got out on the word myriad.
Oh, no. Did
If
you?
I had only read Revelation,
If you'd read
chapter
Revelation.
5 as an 8th grader.
Let this be a lesson to all of you. If you have a spelling bee coming up, read the book of Revelation.
That's right. It's good for you.
It's good for
So,
you.
myriad-
If you don't have a
and-
spelling bee coming up, read the book of Revelation.
Really embarrassing part was it was in the first round.
Oh no! Think
Yeah,
of
I
how
didn't know that word.
think of how far you could have
There
gone.
was a lot of other words they could have asked me that I would have spelled correctly.
Why did they choose
But
myriad
that one, I needed humbled.
for an 8th grade spelling bee? Why
I
would they
don't know.
choose myriad?
It was a conspiracy, I tell you.
It was a conspiracy.
Okay.
You're
Yeah, now that's why I'm not teaching English today.
yeah. That's why you don't teach English. Just think of how your life would have changed.
I could have,
you
fame
would've-
and power and riches and wisdom and might and honor. No,
Yeah.
that wouldn't have been mine.
No, probably not.
Probably not for
Probably
winning
not.
the spelling bee. All right.
But so that completes the vision in heaven. It's a 2-chapter vision, and the first one gives a description of the throne and throne room and how glorious it is with all the descriptive words. And I should have brought some sardis and some jasper tonight, and I forgot. But I was also going to bring a denarius, and I forgot to do that too. So I'm 0 for 2.
Oh man, stinks
But-
to get old, doesn't it?
It does. It does. So that's the image that we see, and so that opens the door then for scene 7 of something.
Scene 7 in chapter 6. Oh,
No.
seeing 7.
Seeing 7, but not
seeing 7, not seeing
they won't
7.
all
Okay.
they won't all be there in chapter
They won't be.
six.
No, there's always an interlude.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No.
Okay, chapter 6. The opening of the first 6 seals. This is highly intense stuff here, folks.
This is awesome.
It is really neat.
You want to trade? You want to do chapter 5 and let me do chapter 6?
Too late.
Oh man.
You get to weigh in.
Okay.
Okay. Revelation 6 verses 1 and 2. We'll take each seal at its as it comes here. And I saw when the Lamb broke one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures saying, as with the voice of thunder, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. So the breaking of the first seal. So this build-up through all of chapter 5, well, really starting in chapter 4, but then in chapter 5 we're introduced to the book that is sealed, and John at first is worried that nobody will be able to open it, and then the one who is worthy steps forth, and then there is celebration like we can't imagine because one who is worthy has been found. And so there's a build-up for this. I mean, the anticipation that John must have been feeling as the seals now are ready to be broken, I don't think can be overstated. That is highly anticipated what's going to happen here. So he sees the breaking of the first seal. He sees, hears, feels, experiences one of the 4 living creatures thundering in a loud voice, "Come," and that is directed to the horse that comes riding out of wherever he comes riding out of it. And it's kind of one of those things: is it riding out of the mist? Is it riding out of the book itself? Is it riding past from another scene or something? I'm not real sure how that vision plays out or how that imagery works, but there appears a white horse, and on the white horse is a rider with a bow and a crown. And this would have spoken to the people of the day. If there was one thing that people of this culture feared, it was an invading army from the east with their thundering horses coming to do battle. They had seen this happen going back to the Persians. They had seen this happen generation after generation. There are thundering hordes of people that come riding from the east. And this imagery here is symbolic or similar to what a Parthian rider would have looked like. And Parthians were riders that would have come out of what we would call Iran today, kind of where Persia was at, Babylon, that area. Their symbol was to ride with a bow, and they wore the conquering crown.
Some of their coins even have that on there.
Some of the coins even have that on there, that imagery. So,
You know what else?
tell me.
The Romans were lousy with the bow. They could not use a bow. They had the sword, but they were really lousy with the bow. And whenever they needed bowmen, they had to hire somebody else. But these Parthians came through, and they just put it to them. They killed 20,000 of them, captured another 10,000. And you're right, they were scared to death of somebody riding up with a bow in their hand, because that was not a happy memory for them.
And so this, I mean, the imagery of this, while, you know, remarkable to us, I think packed a little more punch for them because of what they had experienced and what historically it meant for them. We have talked, the bow is a symbol of military might, and the Romans respected that. They knew to fear, you know, for Romans to do damage, they had to get close enough to you to hurt you with a sword. And when they got close enough, they were good at it. But if there was one thing they feared, it was being killed before they ever got to the battle, because the other side was better with a bow. So it was a symbol of military might. The crown, this crown, we've talked about the two different crowns in the book of Revelation. There's the Stephanos, which is the crown of victory, and then there is the diadem, which is the crown of what's the word?
It's like power or might. You can take it. A Stephanos can only be given because you are victorious.
Okay.
You know, the emperors could take the power and they put a diadem on their head, but that didn't mean they deserved a Stephanos.
Right. And so this rider on the white horse is bearing the crown of victory. He is worthy to wear the crown that he is wearing. And he is going forth conquering and to conquer. And this word conquer comes from the word Nike, where the shoe company stole its name from. But this word appears over and over through the book of Revelation. And it is, in most general terms, it's a good word in the book of Revelation. We like this word. It's because we are going to be victorious. God's side is going to be victorious. And this is a good thing as well. It's Jesus himself who is breaking the seal, who is releasing this white horse, who is going out to do these things. This is not, as fearful as it is, it's still in accordance with God's will. It's still God's purpose that is bringing this about. Can we identify the rider? Do we know who this is? Some want to, because there is a rider on a white horse later in the book who is identified as Jesus. And some want to really tie this into being Jesus at the beginning and then Jesus at the end as well, kind of bookending some of the visions that are going on here. But there's some difficulties with that because Jesus is the one who broke the seal. Jesus is the one who released this rider, and now switching the imagery from Jesus as the lamb opening the seals to all of a sudden now Jesus on the horse riding along is kind of a difficult transition to make. Plus, this is not the type of conquering that Jesus really is bringing. And later in the book, Jesus has a sword, and this guy has a bow. So there's some difficulties with trying to compare this to Jesus.
It is possible.
It is possible, but it's not something I'm going to be mad at you if you say yes or no.
Should we get some Nikes for this?
I've got a pair of Nikes.
I don't have any Nikes.
I could wear them next week.
I just wonder if we should wear Nikes while we're doing Revelation.
I don't know.
You know
didn't tell
something?
what kind of shoe he was wearing.
Well, he was a Nike. Do you know something really cool?
What?
Have you ever heard of the book of Zechariah?
I have.
And in Zechariah chapter 1, there is a vision of horses and riders. And I didn't add it to the screens. People have to go to, if they can find Zechariah, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi.
Yeah, right before the end of
the Old Testament. If they'll look in chapter 1, about verses 7 through 11, they will see a vision of horses and riders. And so we probably should have covered Zechariah before we did this.
We probably should have got, because Zechariah is the other apocalyptic
That's
book.
the other one we should have covered. All right. We missed it.
And there are some similarities there, but there are some differences as well. So it's not the same four-colored horses. It's not the same imagery, but it's similar.
But kind of like the cherubim, the descriptions are not the same, but they're the same creatures. It's just it focuses on different elements of them. But so I hope they don't go to Zechariah chapter 1 and
not yet.
Take a look at that.
Because we're ready for seal 2 now. 6, 3, and 4 tells us that when he broke the second seal, I heard the second living creature saying, "Come," and another, a red horse, went out. And to him who sat on it, it was granted to take peace from the earth, and that men should slay one another, and a great sword was given to him. So again, the imagery here the second seal is broken, and we see this thing repeated 4 times in a row. The seal is broken, one of the living creatures calls out, "Come." And he's issuing that command, bringing forth the horse and its rider from the seal that has been broken. This is a red horse, and the word red here it's a fiery red. It's like, the sports car red. This is not dull, drab red. This is bright, shiny, fiery red. And this rider's mission is to instigate conflict. If there is peace in existence, there won't be peace after this horse and rider go past. And his sword is the close combat sword of the Roman army. And you have to get in close with this sword to do the work that it needs to do. So he's going to be not doing his harm from a distance like the rider with the bow is doing. He's going to get up close and personal and instigate conflict at a very close distance. The great here that is described to him, it says a great sword was given to him. It's not great as in a great big sword, but it's great in its effectiveness. It does exactly what it's supposed to do. He's a master with this thing. He's a ninja. Well, not really a ninja because he's more Roman imagery. But so, can this rider be identified?
It's kind of like war.
Yeah.
And
war personified.
War personified. War comes in and does all these things.
And so there have been some that have tried to, identify this as maybe a certain emperor who is, a warmonger or a certain military leader or whatever. But again, the imagery here is not the type of imagery that in some places in the book of Revelation or in Daniel's writings or in Ezekiel's writings where we have historical references that we can kind of tie into one person and say, okay, we think this works here as an identification. And so this is one part of the book where if we get too caught up in trying to identify specifics, then we miss the boat. We miss the imagery that's taking place. This is not about identifying individuals. This is about getting the overall theme, the overall message.
And should have mentioned earlier that the seals reveal, open seals reveal.
Correct.
Trumpets announce or warn, bowls are poured out, and that's when it actually takes place.
Okay.
So especially at this level where we're just revealing, they're not specifics. It's just, as you point out, it's just the overall idea that it's presenting. Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. Right. It is an interesting point. When you think of the function of the four living creatures as they surround the throne, they are in a sense the four closest things to God and His throne, and so they are the ones that are most closely tied to the identity of God and to the carrying out of His will. And so, as the Lamb who is worthy is opening the seals, He's the only one that can open the seals, but there is still a vast expanse of creation that is affected by God's will, and they're participating in that because it's of their utmost concern that God's will is constantly carried out, and that He is constantly given the volition to do as He sees fit. And so they participate in that to the best that they can, or to the biggest of their ability.
I wonder how many of the open seals are accompanied by one of the creatures saying, "Come."
How many creatures are there?
How many creatures are there? So I would guess that probably 4 of the open seals are accompanied by one of the creatures saying, "Come."
Right. And there is that pattern. And then we see the pattern broken when we get to the 5th seal, but the things shift when we get to the 5th seal. There's going to be a difference there. So there's no need for a living creature to speak at that point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Right.
they announce. They don't announce. They call forth.
They
these
call
riders.
it forth. Yeah, they are speaking. They are speaking with the. I can't think of the word, with the like an ambassador speaks for a king. The authority. They are speaking with the authority of God. They have God's authority to call forth the rider as the seal is broken.
They're kind of speaking the
yeah.
name of.
Yeah.
In the name of God.
Mm-hmm. So the 3rd seal, verses 5 and 6, when He broke the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature saying, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard, as it were, a voice in the center of the 4 living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine." So the third, we see this pattern. The third seal is broken. The third living creature calls out, "Come." And now there is a black horse. And black is the color of grief and mourning. And so what is it that follows after this? The rider that was on the white horse, the one who brought, the one who brought the arrow and the conquering. And then we had the next horse that brought war. What is it that follows after those things? It's terrible. It's plague. It's just a terrible.
It's famine.
Destruction It's a terrible destruction of the economy. There is suffering after the last shot is fired in a war, the last thrust of the sword, whatever, depending on the time we're talking about. After that last moment, the war has ended. The suffering really has only just started. And that's the significance of the horse here that is being announced at this point. So even after the conquering and the war has taken place, there is still suffering that's going to take place. A rider with a set of scales, and it's a set of scales that would have been weighed, used for weighing food, the food that is mentioned, the barley and the wheat. It's a sign of hardship. If you have to worry about weighing out, if you're constantly worried about weighing out your food and measuring the food that you're getting for the money, that's a sign that you don't have enough money to buy the food you want. And the price is very costly here. The amounts that are mentioned, a denarius was a day's wage. So if you go out and work all day, and at the end of the day you have enough money to buy 1 quart of wheat, 1 quart of wheat is what it takes to feed one person for a day in their economy. And so you have a family of 6 mouths to feed, and you have enough money after working all day to buy 1 quart of wheat to feed one person. You're in bad shape.
You can buy a coarser grain like barley, and that's why you get 3 quarts of barley for a denarius. And so if you want to give your family something of lesser nutritional value, then
barley was considered by the upper crust of society to be animal fodder. We don't feed barley to our family, we feed barley to our animals. And so if you're buying animal feed for your family because that's all you can afford, then things are in really bad shape.
And as is often the case, this had a bigger impact on the poor than it did on the rich.
Right.
And so that's why it doesn't touch the oil and the wine.
Right.
It's just it's going to be tough on them.
Right.
And that's the reason I should have brought a denarius, because we could have bought at least a quart of wheat with it.
Bought a quart of wheat.
Yeah.
I'm off gluten right now.
Well, it's a good thing I didn't bring that denarius then.
Not really. I like me some gluten. There was something like a voice from the center of the living creatures, which I found just to be an interesting way of saying it. A lot of times when we hear these heavenly creatures speaking, their voices are described as waterfalls or as thunder or as trumpets, or it's a voice, but yet it's not like a voice like we would recognize or that we know and understand in a physical sense. And so I thought that was an interesting turn of phrase. But it comes from the center of the living creatures. It's not from the throne itself, but it's probably one of the living creatures that was speaking and saying the things about the cost of the grain. Next section here is the fourth seal. When he broke the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come." And I looked, and behold, an ashen horse, and he who sat on it had the name Death. And Hades was following with him, and authority was given to them over 1/4 of the earth to kill with sword and famine and with pestilence and by the wild beasts of the earth. So the pattern continues. The fourth seal is broken. The fourth living creature now issues the call to come forth. And this word, it's an ashen horse, which is an interesting thing for the New American Standard and other translations use that word ashen. Does anyone else have a different color mentioned there? Pale, green. Did anyone say green? Because that's what it should be.
Yeah.
Chloros.
Chloros. It should say. They should skip the ashen part and just put chloros in there.
Chloros is where we get the word chlorophyll, which is the stuff in plants that makes it green.
When would a horse be green? When it's dead and rotting.
When it's dead and when its flesh is rotting.
When is flesh chloros?
Yeah.
It's not ashen. It's dead green.
It's not like St. Patrick's Day green. It's not pretty green. It's a gross green. And the rider on this horse, this one is identified. This one, we know who this horse was, or this rider was. This rider is Death. And again, after the conquering, after the war, after the famine that has come, all of the suffering that's taking place, I mean, that's what follows. Death follows. And Hades, followed by the afterlife, followed by death is the symbol of physical death. Hades is the symbol of spiritual death, or the death of the soul. And so you have that complete and total death of the people that are affected by the things that are taking place. The aftermath of war is pestilence and plague. There is, disease, and there is just bad stuff that's taking place after they didn't have the Red Cross to go in and help rebuild their society, to help take care of the people that were affected by the war-torn areas. It was just suffering. And ultimately, the resulting devastation after the war is over often was worse than the war itself. More people died after the conclusion of the war from the plague and the famine and the difficulties that ensued afterwards than actually were killed in the battles themselves. So this is complete devastation. So there's this summary of the four horsemen. And these four horsemen represent the difficulties that will be faced by all Christian and non-Christian alike. So this is not a judgment against those people who have been mean to Christians. This is not a judgment against Christians who have not fulfilled their duties. This is just saying it's going to be rough for everybody. There's bad stuff that's going to take place, and a lot of people are going to suffer. And the reason they're given this information is to prepare the believers for the difficulties ahead. Much as Jesus prepared his followers for the destruction of Jerusalem by quoting things from Daniel. And so not a lot of Christians suffered at the fall of Jerusalem because Jesus had prepared his followers for it. But a lot of Jewish people did suffer because they weren't prepared. Here John is being given this information to try to prepare believers for difficulty that's going to take place. Again, we're supposed to be reminded that God is in control. Think of all the things that have led up to the breaking of the seals and these horses coming forth. The scene in chapter 4, anytime we're feeling like the imagery is overwhelming and bad stuff is about to happen, go back to chapter 4. God's in control. He's on the throne. And even through the dispensing of all that judgment, it's only at God's direction. It's only according to his will that these things take place. God has placed limits on the destruction. It's not going to be total. So there's parts of the imagery there, even at the end when it says of that last horse where it says 1/4 of the population. Well, that's bad, but that's a limit. It's not everybody.
And that's the thing about these cycles. At the beginning, it's limited to show that this is just announcing that it's going to happen. When we get down to the bowls, it's total.
Yeah. So God is active in the lives of mankind. This is not a God who has set things into motion and then sits back and watches. This is a God who's actively involved in the lives of his creation. So those are all things that we see from these from the seals that are broken up to this point.
And this is Albert Juror's presentation of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. This is his second most famous work of art.
Okay.
His first most famous work of art is the most recognized work of art in the world. I'm not going to tell you what it is.
Mona
Lisa.
That was
Mona Lisa is very famous, but it's not the most recognized work of art in the world. That's a famous one too. Michelangelo's. No, not the Last Supper, not the Last Judgment.
Whistler's Mother.
That's it. Whistler's Mother. Juror's nickname was Whistler. The praying hands. The praying hands.
The praying hands.
You can go
on anybody's fireplace mantle.
Yeah, everybody's grandmother
got
has one of those. If you go, you can go almost anywhere in the world, and people will recognize that work of art.
If you on your phone, if you're texting the word "pray," it gives you the praying hands.
Yeah, and Albert Juror is the one who did that. But this is his second
emoji.
Second most famous work of art.
Unbelievable.
Is the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
I did not know that.
Now, see what you've learned tonight?
I've learned something.
Don't know what it is, but
Chuck, stay where you're at.
He's going to be moving in about
verses
2
9
minutes.
through 11.
We're going to have to move fast.
And when he broke the fifth seal, I saw underneath the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and because of the testimony which they had maintained. And they cried out with a loud voice, saying, "How long, O Lord, holy and true, wilt thou refrain from judging and avenging our blood on those who dwell on the earth?" And there was given to each of them a white robe, and they were told that they should rest for a little while longer until the number of their fellow servants and their brethren who were to be killed, even as they had been, should be completed also. So the fifth seal is broken. And with the breaking of that fifth seal, we no longer have the voice of one of the four living creatures, but now we have the voice of those who had died as martyrs. So we have the voice of the martyrs calling out from beneath the altar. They were slain for maintaining the testimony of Christ. They were faithful to Christ to the point of death. They had died because of their faith. And the question that was posed by the martyrs was, how long? How long will it be until we are avenged? How long will it be until the righteousness that you claim, God, is carried out on our behalf for the unrighteousness that we suffered? Because we didn't deserve to be killed for staying faithful to Christ. That's a bold question. But in a sense, they earned the right to ask that question.
And they're not asking for vengeance,
Right.
they're asking for judgment.
Right, they're
Justice.
asking for justice.
Justice. They're not asking for revenge.
Right.
It's just justice.
Yeah, we know that we know that sin has to have the price paid.
Yeah.
And if it's a valid question for us to wonder, how long will it be for before the price for that sin is paid? We know that the price for our sins has been paid. We have confidence in that Jesus paid that price for us. We have taken advantage of that. They had done the same, and so they know their sins were already paid for. But there are those who have not taken advantage of that, whose sins need to be called into account. And it's a valid question to ask when that is going to take place. So the response to their question is not the response, as often it is when we question God, when we ask, how long or why or whatever. The answer we get is often not the answer we wanted. It's not really the answer to our question at all, but it's God's response nonetheless. And so the response to their question is they were given white robes. They were told to rest for a little while. They were told, trust me. Is God going to allow those sins to go unpunished? Is God going to forget that they have been abused? No. I mean, all of that's going to be taken care of. But as far as answering the question, how long or when is this going to take place? It's not up to them. It's not for them to know. That's for God to know and for Him to understand. So He will comfort them. He will take care of them. He will provide for them. But He won't answer their question, not the way that they expect Him to. In a sense, they're being told you can't understand, which often we see that happening with Job. When Job questioned God, God showed up and He started asking Job a whole bunch of questions that Job couldn't answer, right? We see that with Habakkuk when he has questions about how is it that you can allow the Babylonians to come and conquer us. Habakkuk sits back and he doesn't get the answer he expected, but he doesn't understand. They're being told, I care. They're being told, it will be all right. So God responds to their question. He gives them answers, just not the answers to the question that they're asking. And then the sixth seal is broken in verses 12 to 17. It says, and I looked, and He broke the sixth seal, and there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth made of hair, and the whole moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth, and as a fig tree casts its unripe figs when shaken by a great wind. And the sky was split apart like a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. And the kings of the earth and the great men and the commanders and the rich and the strong and every slave and free man hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. And they said to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the presence of Him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of their wrath has come, and who is able to stand? The sixth seal is broken. So this is, we see the progression taking place. The sixth seal is broken. There's an earthquake. The sun is dark. The moon becomes like blood. Earthquakes represent destruction of the things that we depend on the most. I mean, our houses are everything that we depend on for our shelter, for our livelihood. If an earthquake comes, those things are shaken. Sackcloth represents loss and mourning. So there's destruction, but there's also loss that goes along with that. The stars fall to the earth. The sky is split apart. I mean, the imagery here is not a small thing, right? This is major happening. This is major destruction that's taking place. The mountains and islands are moved. The forces at play here are beyond anything that's man-made or that's explainable by man. All people, and it lists the people: the rich, the poor, the kings, the slaves, the free. Everybody finds themselves equal in this scenario because they are all trying to hide from this destruction. And they're hiding together in the same caves. So it's not like there's a cave for the kings and a cave for the poor. They're all hiding together.
We should mention too that this is extremely common language in prophecy. Over and over and over and over in the Old Testament it says these things are going to happen. It does not represent the end of the world. It represents the end of a system.
Right.
And so this is, I've got a long list of them here, but this is common prophetic language for the end of a system. Joel uses the same language, and Peter says the day of Pentecost is the fulfillment of Joel's prophecy. And so it's the end of the Jewish system. And so this language, as radical as it is very common in prophetic language.
And we saw that over and over again with Daniel's prophecies as well, when Daniel would see these great destructive visions and people want to tie those to the end of the world. Well, it wasn't the end of the world, it was the end of Greece, it was the end of Rome, it was the end of Babylon, it was the end of each of those kingdoms. And it was just using that destructive language.
Exactly. Do we have any questions for the people?
Oh, always.
Okay, good. I'm glad they got them all.
I'm telling you.
Okay.
Wow.
Wow. Did they absorb that?
I think you talked too slow tonight.
I talked too slow. Yeah. Thank you very much
Thank you.
for being patient.